Okay, guys, welcome to the Thrive Bites podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. This is a podcast meant to give you three things, and that teaching on how to live a plant power lifestyle, enhancing our emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And today, I have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Chef AJ, and she has been devoted to a plant-exclusive diet for over 43 years. She's the host of the television series Healthy Living with Chef AJ, which airs on Foodie TV. She's not only a chef, but she's also an instructor, a professional speaker, and author of the popular book, Unprocessed: How to Achieve Vibrant Health and Your Ideal Weight. And this chronicles her journey from an obese junk food vegan faced with a diagnosis of precancerous polyps to learning how to create foods that nourish and heal the body as well. Her latest best-selling book, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, a revolutionary approach to conquer cravings, overcome food addiction, and lose weight without going hungry, has received glowing endorsement by many luminaries in the plant-based movement. So without further ado, please welcome Chef AJ. Hello. How's it going? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending the time, spending your energies, and spending your continued enthusiasm with us today here on the podcast.
It is my pleasure. I don't know if you know how I even found you. Do you know that story?
I think you found me through social media. I think it was through Instagram, right?
And not exactly. I did contact you there, but what it was is I host some summits, and I was hosting a summit on GI health, and one of the guests was a doctor named Dr. Uma Naidu. And so when I have to interview a guest, in addition to reading their book, I like to listen to everything I can find. So I just went to podcast and I put in her name, and apparently you had interviewed her. So I listened to the interview and I said, well, who is this guy and who is the podcast? And that's what got me to find out about you.
Well, she is a lovely, lovely individual, and I'm very glad that, we've been, have been connected. And isn't it crazy how crazy and not so crazy, right? Pre-pandemic and now with the pandemic, how these are the evolving ways of connecting with people. Very interesting times that we are in.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying them, actually. Not the pandemic part, of course, but just the meeting people I might have otherwise not met if my life was business as usual.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a great opportunity to meet people you wouldn't have crossed paths with, like you said, and, just very innovative ways. So, but I am very glad to have you on the show with us today. And, you have built a very large network. You do what you do for so many years, and you have developed a great following. For us, we love to learn more about people. We love learning about their stories and how they get from point A to point Z. So to kind of orient our audiences to you who may not know you and your work, can you share a little bit about your story in terms of how you came about into being immersed in the culinary world, but the culinary world where you are dedicated and so devoted to improving other people's lives through your personal experience?
Sure, absolutely. So it was almost 20 years ago, when I was 43 years old, that it first came to my awareness that what we eat actually matters. So for the first 43 years of my life, I basically did what most people do. You eat what you like, regardless of consequences of health, environment, or animals. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that for animals, because I actually did become vegan in 1977 when I was 17 for ethical reasons. But for the most part, I didn't really give a thought what I put in my mouth, because as you know, as a doctor, you're not given a lot of in medical school, you're not given a lot of nutritional training, and there's a lot of confusion around nutrition. So it was never really anything I thought about. If you liked it, you ate it, kind of thing. And when I was 43 years old, I woke up on New Year's Day bleeding from what they now call edematous or precancerous polyps. So my colon was riddled with these polyps. And I had a strong family history of colon cancer. I had a grandmother that died of it, an uncle who had 80% of his colon removed, all kinds of bowel disease in my family. My mom died of a bowel obstruction. My grandmother had diverticulitis. So, it's strong family history. And so of course, I was alarmed. And when I had actually, they wouldn't even do a colonoscopy because I had an HMO, and they said, oh, well, it wasn't your mother or father, so it's not a first degree relative. We're just going to do a sigmoidoscopy, which I'm told they don't really do very much anymore because it doesn't go far enough up. But even so, with the sigmoidoscopy, they discovered that my colon was riddled with these precancerous polyps. But they couldn't remove them because my colon, as the doctor said, was too dirty. That's not what you want to hear, because it was in a state of disarray. Even though I had done that horrible prep, after eating junk for 43 years and basically eating no fruits and vegetables, he couldn't get a clean shot to remove the polyps, and you can't risk infection. So he said, well, we'll just, you'll have to have surgery. And I'm like, no, I won't. That's like my number one fear. Well, actually, surgery isn't my number one fear in life. My number one fear is general anesthesia. I have an actual phobia because when I was 19 years old, I went into the hospital for what was going to be a same-day operation. I was allergic to the anesthetic. I woke up with a team of respiratory therapists resuscitating me with an ambu bag, and there was a ventilator right there. And I used to be a respiratory therapist, and I do not want to go on a ventilator. That is my biggest fear. Luckily, I started breathing, but because of the allergic reaction to the anesthetic, I was in the hospital instead of 6 hours, 6 weeks. And I always retained that fear of surgery and anesthesia. I said, well, no, thank you. So I didn't know what to do. So I went to a place called the Optimum Health Institute in San Diego, or Lemon Grove, actually, really just to give myself some time to think, because I didn't know what to do. And the funny thing was I had already been vegan for 26 years. And it's like, how can I have the beginning of colon cancer? I'm vegan. Isn't that prevent everything? Well, no, it doesn't, because I wasn't a whole food vegan. I wasn't a healthy vegan. I wasn't eating fruits and vegetables. So it was just a miracle that I found this place. I actually found it. It was funny. It was a spa magazine, a discounted spa magazine, because I always wanted to go to Rancho La Puerta, which is actually a place I teach now, but I couldn't afford it. This place was $850 a week. And I'm like, well, I can afford that. So I went there, and little did I know that it was going to change my life, because it's the first time that anyone, especially healthcare professionals like doctors and nurses, said that what we eat actually has a profound effect on everything, on what we look like, how we feel, but most importantly, what diseases we get and what diseases we can ultimately reverse. And people were coming there with diseases that I think were much more serious than mine. They had lupus and Lyme's disease and brain cancer, and they were all getting well. And I'm like, well, this is going to be a piece of kale for me, because I don't really have cancer yet. They're just calling it pre-cancer. And as long as I get rid of these polyps, I should be fine. So basically it's whole food, plant-based there with no sugar, oil, salt, but it's also raw, and it's not very calorically dense. So what I'm saying is it's more of a healing place or a detox place. I don't know if you could stay forever on that plan, but it was incredible. There were actors there and movie stars and NFL players. There's people from all over the world. It was really an interesting experience. And, we'd go to these classes and we'd learn all the things that now I know, and I'm starting to teach things that I never knew, things that, I remember asking a doctor in my 20s, I said, I think I'm a sugar addict. Oh, that's impossible, as he drank his tab, And I'm old enough to remember when doctors would smoke and actually smoke in their office. That's how old I am.
Office, hospitals.
Yeah. So it was really wonderful, that the experience I had there and what I learned. And I followed the diet that they gave, which was, it's very similar to the one I have now, except I'm not raw. I do eat starch. I ate cooked vegetables, cooked potatoes, grains, legumes, that kind of thing. So it was raw, but it was out without sugar, oil, salt, or flour, or alcohol, or caffeine, or chocolate. And 6 months after that, I had gone back to my HMO, and I asked for colonoscopy. I kept asking, they wouldn't give it, but they gave me another sigmoidoscopy. But this time the results were different. And the funny thing was, it was the same gastroenterologist doing it. So he had my chart, and they actually take photos when they're in your colon with a camera of the polyps, so they know how big they are and where they are. And he told me that my colon was clear. It was clean. It was pink. He said it was vascular like a newborn baby. And he said, where did you have the surgery? And I'm like, I didn't have surgery. I told you, I'm afraid of surgery. He goes, well, how do you account for the fact of what I'm seeing now? I said, well, I changed my diet. And he goes, oh, that's impossible. And he storms out of the room, and a nurse, or maybe she was a GI doctor, I don't remember, but she had an accent as if she was from India. And I remember she said, once he was gone, she goes, I believe you. And so right there, like Oprah calls, the light bulb went off, and I'm like, whoa, Nobody ever told me this. And that's weirdly when I immersed myself in the nutritional science and the cooking. Because right after that, I went to culinary school. I took a leave of absence from my job. I was actually an activity director at a retirement home. And it wasn't because I was trying to be a chef. It was like, the food's going to have to taste better than it did at OHI. You can do anything for a short time, like a healing diet or a cleanse, but I could not maintain that diet. I knew I couldn't. So I went to culinary school just to learn how to make things taste better. And then I really liked it so much that I switched careers at the age of 43.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was about to say, is it because they didn't have enough flavoring? Is it bland, or the presentation just didn't look appetizing enough for you?
Okay. So there, if I go there today, if I ever did go back, I probably would love the food, but realize I was coming from 43 years of junk eating, 26 of them as a vegan. I was used to having Coke Slurpees for breakfast with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup, Dr. Peppers for lunch. Nothing really tasted good to me. I didn't understand the concept of neuroadaptation or neurological adaptation. So it really wasn't their fault that I didn't like the food. It was because my palate was just a mess. So I probably would like it a lot better now, but also, I mean, I think raw diets can be good for some people, but I use a principle, and I know you do too, because I interviewed you for my summit. You understand about caloric density. If you're going to eat 100% raw, unless you're willing to eat a lot of the higher fat foods like the nuts, seeds, and avocados, you're going to have to eat a lot of volume. And at a certain point, at the end of the day, you get tired of chewing. So for me, having starches like cooked potatoes and sweet potatoes and whole grains like rice and quinoa and millet, for me, it just feels like it works better than just eating fruits and vegetables all day. I'm not saying that that's not healthy. I know people that do it, but man, I do love my starch. So for me, that was, I think, the missing was I prefer my calories from starch than from fat.
Yeah. Because a lot of the patients that I counsel, their concepts, when I'm trying to teach them to eat more plants, right? I'm a family, practice, physician, and I meet everyone from a, carnivore to an extreme vegan and everyone in between. And, my thing is to be able to eat more plants. And a lot of people, when they think of, plant food, they think of a salad or steamed vegetables and just things that are very, very bland and without flavor or imagination. And so that is huge, especially from a culinary perspective. You want to be able to make it, flavorful and appetizing and presentable. So, that's why I asked, what was it like? Because something must have turned you off, but you had such great motivation because your health was in stake, right? You knew that you needed to be there, but you're like, oh man, this could have been better.
I think it was just I wasn't getting enough calories is what it was. And I remember when I went back for a second week, I said, look, I'm not here for healing anymore. You got to give me more food. And they gave me a half an avocado a day. And that did make a difference. And, because you couldn't have contraband there. If you brought food in, you got kicked out. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's a great place, and I hadn't yet heard about the True North Health Center, which probably would have been an equally wonderful experience to go for healing. Nobody ever said that processed food was unhealthy to me. Up until then, the sugar and flour, that this isn't food. And now there's so much information out there with people like books from Dr. David Kessler and Michael Moss that processed food is not only unhealthy, but it's addictive. And when you're a food addict, which I was, or at least a sugar addict, whole natural food at first doesn't taste very good.
Yeah, definitely. So it's the combination of, understanding the flavorings, how to pair things, which groups would, also create satisfying feelings and whatnot. And also food is not just food, right? There's a lot of layers to it. There's an emotional component to it. There's a cultural component to it. I remember when I was, when we were seeing each other for, being on each other's summit, I asked you, what is your favorite, food as a child, because you have a Jewish background, right? And from that, could you make something more plant-based based off of that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, and you can, because I remember, as crazy as it is for somebody that's been vegan for so long, I remember my grandmother's chopped liver, and you can with walnuts and green beans. There's ways to make plants taste like liver if you like liver. So I don't know anything that can't really be done anymore in the plant-based world. They're making eggs and cheese and all kinds of meat. This has never been a better time to be plant-based.
It is. And I'm sure, from your eyes, and having traversed, before vegan was a thing, back in the day, and now it's so, popular and ingrained in our mental society, you had to be more innovative. You had to, have creative ways to be able to, not just for your health, because this, you were doing it for your health first before you became, a culinary instructor and teaching the masses. So, what were over your journey, because we can go, hours upon hours, and you have such a colorful backstory. What were the major pain points, during your journey, and what were the major lessons that you've learned that, hey, what I'm doing is not just temporary. What I'm doing is not just short term, because when people think of diets, they think of, okay, maybe I can just do this for this little period of time and then I can get back to where I was. What were the pain points for you that, really became the sticking points for you to really continue and make it sustainable?
Yeah, there's a few, and what you say is absolutely true. When somebody's trying to affect permanent dietary and lifestyle change, if what they're doing isn't permanent, it or isn't sustainable, it won't be permanent. So I remember, I graduated culinary school in 2003. And shortly thereafter, I started teaching cooking at various culinary schools, but also at Whole Foods. And I remember teaching at the big store, one of their newer stores in Pasadena, where I had like 77 people, which was really good for that. That store kept having me like, you're getting so many people. Cause I think my recipes taste good. And I think I'm a good articulator of the information and a good culinary instructor. And I don't even remember what recipe I'm doing, but in the middle of the class, a gentleman, and I shouldn't say gentleman because what he said wasn't very gentlemanly, but I remember he can. And I just assumed he was going to ask a question on the recipe. He goes, if the vegan diet's so good, why are you so fat? And, now I take stand-up comedy and improv, and I have a catchy comeback, that I can say like, oh, I think it must have been something I ate, sir. But I was like pretty shocked, I don't even remember. And it wasn't even so much that my feelings were hurt, because part of me was like, yeah, I don't know. Why am I so fat? Because I was almost 200 pounds at 5'6", and I was vegan. I didn't know, And so that kind of always stuck in my head, like, am I so fat? Because I didn't understand calorie density, basically.
Right.
And so the other big wake up call after the one with the colon cancer scare is in 2000, the year 2000, shortly before my 50th birthday, I had a slip and fall accident in an office building. It was caught on camera, so it was very obvious that the person mopping the floor just didn't put the sign up, and So I fell. I got a really bad break in my knee. And when I went to the emergency room, they gave me crutches, and I couldn't use them because I was too fat. And I didn't have body strength. And so they tried to give me a walker, and I couldn't use it. And so I had to get in a wheelchair. And it's very humbling to be in a wheelchair for 3 or 4 months, especially if you've never been in one. I mean, there were some I don't want to say perks to being in a wheelchair, but it's interesting because I do remember some positive things about being in the wheelchair. Like I remember I was shopping at Whole Foods once. People are very polite to you for obviously. So people were very polite, but I remember I had run into an actor from a show that I liked. And normally it's not that I'm shy, but I generally respect other people's privacy, but I really like this actor. And somehow being in the wheelchair, I felt like he wasn't going to, not that he would be mean to me, but you never know what you're going to get. And I remember feeling like I could talk to anybody because I don't know. It was just, I just remember being a little bit more outgoing in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I found that people were very helpful, like when I would go shopping. And so that I remember that. But the part that I didn't like so much was that I couldn't take care of my own activities of daily living, like, going to the restroom, bathing and dressing. And the thing is, back then we couldn't afford, home care. So my husband had to do it. And that was kind of embarrassing. I mean, it's not what I signed up for. That's not what I wanted. And so I kept saying, as soon as I'm out of this chair, I'm really going to do something about this weight. And so I did. And what I did is I went to the next place that was part of my healing journey, the True North Health Center, where I really learned what it is I teach today, which at the end of the day is calorie density. Because the truth is even if somebody didn't want to be vegan or plant-based, the calorie density approach never fails. And it's different than counting calories. People have to really understand the work of Dr. Barbara Rolls. But once I really understood it, and the funny thing is I had books already on my shelf on calorie density.
Mhm.
Dr. Ornish's book, Eat More, Weigh Less. I had Dr. McDougall's book, The McDougall Program for Maximum Weight Loss. But I really needed to be sat down by the doctors, Dr. Lyle and Dr. Goldham. I just needed it explained to me almost one-on-one. And once I did that, the weight just came off. And it's been almost 10 years now as a slender person after living as an obese person for 50 years. And so as much as I didn't like the accident, because I do have knee problems today and I'm not having surgery, trust me.
Is the knee feeling better?
I mean, it's a lot better. And that's the thing, people say, oh, you're too thin. You look better 10 pounds heavier. I said, I may have looked better to you 10 pounds heavier, but my knee disagrees because for every pound you're overweight, it's about 5 pounds or more to your knee. So I need to be lean to not have knee pain. It's mostly better, but there are times I'm playing pickleball or something. I know something's wrong, but I'm not getting it fixed because my goal is to live the rest of my life without I just want to die in my
You're like, I don't want that anesthesia. I don't want to go under because it's mainly the anesthesia, right?
That's really what I'm afraid of. And of course, I don't want operations without anesthesia. I'm not saying that. But the thing is, when it came to my knee, I forgot to tell you, I had 3 consults. Nobody would do it without a general. I couldn't get a doctor that would do it with like a local or whatever. I said, forget it. I'm too scared. And it's funny because I just have a friend now that actually had a stroke from a knee surgery from a blood clot. Yeah. And it's like, people, stuff. I mean, this stuff is life-saving at times, but it's not without risk. And I am very risk adverse. I am one of these people that is very risk adverse. And so in a way it is a good thing because I always wondered why I was overweight and what I should do about it because diets don't work. I mean, you can only do diets for a short period of time, but calorie density did work and eating. And also I learned another layer at the True North Health Center, which again, it's not for everybody because one of the things I tell people, Dr. Zhu, is if they really want to change is do the least restrictive program that they can do to get them the results they seek. The thing is people that have struggled for a long time with weight and food addiction often can't do like a more liberal program that like maybe a 20-year-old just finding out about plant-based nutrition can do. So what they do a little bit differently at the True North Health Center, which when I think about it, they did at Optimum Health, they just didn't say it, is they do the S.O.S free version of a whole food plant-based diet. They do one completely without sugar, oil, and salt. And also there is no flour or alcohol or caffeine or chocolate. But for people that have trouble not overeating, getting rid of the sugar, the oil, and the salt, it makes it really easy if people can do it. Not everybody will be able to do it, but those that do seem to have really great results because all 3 of those things just stimulate your appetite and make it harder to not overeat. So, it's never easy at the beginning making any kind of change. But when you understand, your why, they say the why that makes you cry. I did not want my husband taking care of me like that. I'm kind of an independent person and private. I don't like being bathed. I know for some people that might sound like a great thing, but I'm like my dog Bailey, don't.
Oh, yeah. But I'm sure I've met him, off camera and, he's such a wonderful guy. And I'm sure that, when push comes to shove, no pun intended, it's, he would be there, what I'm saying? But it's also important to feel like, hey, I can do things for myself and, I can be independent and, just the feelings and the notions of being in a wheelchair or, being in a crutches and needing someone else to assist you can be for some people, debilitating on a deeper level, what I'm saying? So I totally get that,
Yeah. But it was interesting to see the other side. And I hope I didn't offend anybody that's disabled in any way. I mean, it was an interesting experience, and just to see it from another, because like on one hand, you don't want to like just assume the person needs help, but you want to be there if they do need help, so to speak,
Yeah, definitely. And going back to the knee, it's, I see a lot of knee pain, osteoarthritis, walking through my door in addition to low back pain. It's like one of the top 3 reasons people come in. And a lot of times, people can't really put 2 and 2 together that it's their diet and lifestyle. The combination of the 2, has led to, a certain body habitus, for them to exert pressure, cause inflammation, cause the bone, cartilage, everything in between to break down. And, I think our healthcare system, It's very necessary, for some conditions that have medications to surgery, life-saving, and we're very fortunate for that, but not necessarily the best solution for every ailment. You know what I'm saying? So going back to what you're saying about the polyps and, about your knee, if we're able to have a healthier lifestyle, we could, actually get it to be very, very, in a very good, stable condition, if not actually, reverse a lot of different things. So.
That's the other thing, is that a lot of doctors will still tell you that, no, if you have this condition, it's permanent. It's not. Just because they haven't reversed them with the methods that they have doesn't mean it's irreversible for you.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to what you mentioned before, it's absolutely true. Up to, I think a recent survey says up to 25% of medical schools actually require a nutritional course in our medical school curricula. And we mainly, at least my experience, we dove really deeply into how drugs work and how disease process come about. Not so much about how to maintain good health and how to maintain wellness. And ergo, we didn't have that much nutritional / lifestyle curricula. And so, that's why I went down the route that I went down. If I had enough, I wouldn't have gone down and we probably wouldn't be talking right now. So let's go deeper into, you call the S.O.S or the S.O.S AF, right? I'm trying to remember the acronyms.
All right, so I didn't need to put another acronym out there, but what was happening is I was teaching an SOS-free diet, sugar, oil, salt. I don't know if it was coined by Dr. Goldhammer or someone else in the natural hygiene or national health movement, but people weren't understanding it, because when they were taking my program, they understood what sugar was and what oil was and salt was, but they were still eating a lot of bread and flour products and drinking alcohol. And I said to Dr. Goldhammer, I said, they're not getting it. He goes, well, of course, refined sugar includes alcohol and flour. I go, well, not to the people I'm working with. So I added the A for alcohol and the F for flour, and I call it SOFAs free: sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt. And I say, if you want to be healthy and lose weight, get off the sofas. Literally get off the sofa and exercise and get off the chemicals of sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt. Because I like the way that Dr. Goldhammer explains that those really aren't food. I mean, sugar is not a food. Fruit's a food, but sugar's not. Oil's not a food. Nuts and seeds and avocado and olives are a food. Flour's not a food. Whole grains are a food. Alcohol is not a food. It's a drug. And salt's really not a food, because none of these are found in nature in any concentrated form. They're all highly processed. And for people that are prone to having vulnerabilities towards food addictions, these are things that, as Dr. Goldhammer says, fool the brain satiety mechanisms that exponentially cause people to overeat. They're appetite stimulants. And they're also, with the exception of salt, very calorically dense. And so I call it SOFAs free, so that people understand that flour, for people that suffer from refined food addiction, is the same as sugar, because sugar and flour go through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. So I mean, if I had 2 more letters, I'd put the caffeine and the chocolate in, but so is enough.
Oh no. a lot of audiences are dropping their jaws.
I know, but it's not for everybody. I realize most of the people I'm working with are people like me that were overweight or obese for most of their life, for me over 50 years, that suffer from really what some may say is end-stage food addiction. That's why I say you do the least restrictive program that you can do, but that will also give you the results you seek.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, I've done presentations with food addiction, and, even in the DSM-5, it's not even a legit diagnosis. It's not even existent,
Yeah,
and I find that to be very disturbing, because, we have plenty of, research that shows that, it does the same thing, with Coke and, all these different highly addictive, drugs that, we have the research, we have the results for. But I really believe that, food is going to be the next wave of tackling every type of epidemic, whether it's, the obesity to even the pandemic. We have a lot of, interrelationships between food and, how, gut health and immune system, and how we process and, avoid invaders like viruses. You know what I'm saying? So it's not separate ideas and concepts. They all are part of the whole. And like you were saying, it's the processing. You're taking what Mother Nature had it attendant to, strip it down to its components, and guess what? It's going to have, detrimental effects. So I appreciate you sharing that. Hey guys, this is Dr. Colin Zhu, and welcome to the Thrive Formula. I'm so excited for you to be here and to be just a little curious about what we do. If you know a little bit about my work, I created the Chef Doc in January 2017, and since launching it, I've written a book about thriving and hosting my podcast called Thrive Bites, where we've reached over 90 countries and counting. It's been a humbling and unexpected experience so far. The main driving force to create the Chef Doc was born out of the need to help others to combat chronic lifestyle-related diseases such as high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, inactive physical lifestyle, and simply not being able to cook healthfully. I noticed the same paucity and deficit within our medical school education and also within our medical training across the nation. My mother, who is a traditional Chinese medical doctor, taught me the values of compassion and empathy and looking at things in a very holistic point of view. I felt that I needed to practice what I preach and to lead by example. So I enrolled myself at a health supportive and plant-based culinary school and got certified in health coaching and board certified in lifestyle medicine. I've also adopted a whole foods plant-based approach for many years now. Currently, I take this same education to publicly speak and to hold interactive workshops and demonstrations across the country. 2020 for us, like the rest of the world, gave us a new set of challenges. Even with health disparities and racial injustice, I decided to look at things from a very silver lining perspective. And that meant, how do we become more resilient as a community? How do we pivot as a human species? Do I focus on me or us? Up until the pandemic, I've been grateful and humbled to say that I've been able to thrive in my own life. I've traveled and touched every single continent on the planet, visiting 35 countries, from hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro to talking to king penguins in Antarctica to rappelling off of waterfalls in Costa Rica to medically serving the less fortunate in western villages of the Dominican Republic and seafaring villages off of the islands of Cambodia. With so many different people and different walks of life, I realized that we're more similar than dissimilar. And to cultivate a thriving mindset meant a lot of self-work, self-education, and practical tools, but also in conjunction with other people. I could not be where I am without the support and foundation of others. That means right now, more than ever, we need to be unified and we need to thrive together. Therefore, I decided to create this virtual summit experience, gathering and collaborating with over 45 speakers from different parts of the health and wellness industry to inspire, educate, and teach you the tools to thrive, not just in your own life, but also to those around you. And we will do this through the 5 pillars, what I like to call my 5 to thrive. Food as medicine, functional fitness, relationships, community, and resilience. I'm beyond ecstatic for you to be here, and the only question I would ask is, do you dare to choose to thrive in your own life? If you do, then come on in, let's learn together, and I'll see you inside. Thank you very much. From a culinary perspective, what does that do for our palate, for our taste buds? I had the privilege of interviewing Chef Ramsey Bravo, and he was able to share, and I know you know him as well. But I wanted to hear it from you, from a culinary perspective. What is it like to cook? With the sugar and the salt and the oils, and then when you take it out, like what does it do?
Well, it makes the food incredibly bland if you're somebody that is used to eating sugar, oil, and salt, or especially a lot of it. But there's so many ways to make up for that missing. Salt is probably arguably the hardest for everybody, even if they don't feel like salt is a big thing to them. People say, well, I'm a sugar addict, but I don't get it. It's really hard to go without salt. We're genetically hardwired to prefer the taste of sugar, fat, and salt for survival. But in our evolution, we got these things from nature. So fat we got from whole food fats like nuts, seeds, and avocado when they were they were seasonal. In other words, we were nomadic. We weren't going to Costco and buying a 3-pound bag of roasted salted nuts to get our ounce a day. So when we saw these high calorie dense foods, we'd gorge on them because most of our ancestors didn't have enough calories to survive. So we have a preference for fat. And then I'm sure our ancestors got some fat from animal products, but they didn't eat them to the degree that we're eating them now. They certainly didn't eat factory farmed animals or dairy products. They certainly didn't eat processed oil because there was no processing back then. So what I'm trying to say is if people like sugar, fat, salt, that's normal because you're genetically hardwired to prefer the most concentrated source of calories for survival. We have a preference for salt and sugar. We have taste buds on the tip of our tongue for both. And the thing is with salt, we were able to get sodium from eating things like green vegetables. And the reason we prefer salt is it really was to prevent dehydration because we didn't always have, clean water to drink. We didn't have water delivery like we did back then. So so we needed salt. We needed sodium, at least as an essential nutrient.
To retain water.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the sweet was, so we knew if things were poisonous or not poisonous, because if we got a hold of some food or some berries and they weren't sweet, we knew they were probably not good or poisonous. But when the fruit was sweet, we knew it was safe to eat. Mm-hmm. So we're genetically hardwired to prefer the taste of sugar, fat, and salt. But that's how it was in nature. But now it's not natural anymore. Yeah. We have hundreds of names for sugars that are, things that, that end in OSE, that are manufactured in a lab, agave, maple syrup, brown rice syrup, barley malt, there's all these sugar analogs that are 0 calories, stevia, erythritol, xylitol, mannitol. So these are all man-made sweeteners, right? That where the fiber has been destroyed or removed. And so now it's much more calorically dense. Sugar cane, if you want to eat sugar cane, knock yourself out. It'd take you a month to get through a piece like this. But then they refine it and it's now 1,800 calories a pound. Whereas like if you ate beets, for example, they'd be about 195 calories a pound and they'd have water and fiber and vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants and micronutrients. When you process, whatever it is into sugar or flour, you get rid of all the essential components. So in terms of taste, it's not that hard, actually, believe it or not, to substitute sugar because we have nature's candy. We have fruit. Dates, for example, are like the sweetest thing in the world.
It's your favorite.
and they're not low calorie. I mean, when you think about the fact that like berries and apples are 200 calories a pound, dates are about 1,300 calories a pound. Still much better than sugar at 1,800 calories a pound, but at least they're a whole food with the fiber, the water, and the minerals and the vitamins. But they're really, really sweet. And there's nothing that anyone else can do with sugar that I can't do with dates. I was a pastry chef, executive vegan pastry chef at Sante Restaurant in Los Angeles for 5 years. I wrote a book called A Date with Dessert. So I can do anything with whole dates, date syrup, or date paste, which is still only dates, that anybody can do with sugar. So there's really no need for sugar. And so it's not such a missing for people when you can create your favorite, because I can make anything you want, German chocolate cake, cheesecake, using dates. So you're not going to really miss the fact that it's not white sugar and it's still going to be fairly calorically dense. With oil, the high caloric density can still come from whole food plant fats, nuts, seeds, and avocados. So instead of using oil in baking, for example, I can use things like applesauce or bananas or pumpkin or prune puree, apple butter. There's a tofu, for example. So there's ways to replace it in baking and with cooking. It's really actually quite easy to saute without it. But sometimes people miss the caloric density if they've been eating a lot of oil. So then again, whole food fats are the answer. Nuts, seeds, avocado. Any salad dressing you can make with oil, whether it's Caesar or ranch, I can make with nuts and seeds. It's really easy. So oil and sugar, pretty easy. Salt is hard. And nothing tastes like salt except salt. And it's not that it's hard completely. It just is going to take people some time, because if you have been eating a lot of people say, well, I don't add salt to my food. But if they're eating a lot of processed food, like most Americans who eat, I think I read 67% of their calories and up from processed food, 92% from animal products and processed food. So when you're eating processed food, you're not even tasting the salt. So for example, if you were going to eat French fries or potato chips, they would taste salty because the salt is on the outside. You can see it and your tongue can taste it. But for example, bread has more sodium from salt than potato chips, because the processed food industry, they hide it in foods. And so you're not really tasting a salty food. So you're thinking, well, I'm not eating salt because maybe you're not adding it at the table. So there is a lot of salt, a lot of sodium in processed food. It could take a person up to 30 days to what we call neuroadapt, to get used to a diet lower in sodium. But if people can do that, then eventually the food starts tasting naturally salty. So when they eat things like greens, like rainbow chard or celery, they say, like, wow, this is really, really salty. But as long as you're assaulting, pun intended, your taste buds with a high amount of salt, you won't. But, there's tips and tricks I can give people to make food taste good without salt. And, I used to be before I became a chef, I was an activity director of a retirement home, and we were not allowed to use salt. I mean, I wasn't the chef, but the chef wasn't allowed to use salt.
Mm.
It taught me like a lot of tricks. Like,
oh, wow. That's ahead of their time if there weren't, wow.
Yeah, because I remember this was in 2003, and I remember Javier was his name, and some of the things he would do for one reason were good for another reason. So, for example, like if he was making guacamole, one of the things he would do is he would puree some lettuce. And one of the things it did is extended it because avocados were expensive, but it also gave it, because the sodium in the greens, it also gave it a slightly salty taste. And one of the other things I learned is that our taste buds for salt sit next to our taste buds for sour. So to trick them, if you give yourself something sour, like for instance, if you're eating greens, put some lemon juice, lime juice, or vinegar on it so you don't have that missing. There are things like sun-dried tomatoes, for example.
Yep.
You can get sun-dried tomatoes that have, excuse me, you can get things like sun-dried tomatoes that have nothing on them, no sulfites, no oil, no salt, and they usually come in 3-ounce bags. Well, that was from a 4-pound serving of tomatoes. So even though it's not salty, it's so concentrated that it gives things so much flavor. So there's ways to have flavor without salt. Fresh herbs, for example, are wonderful. And now it is so easy to get amazing salt-free blends at every spice store wherever you live. At least I can vouch for I can vouch for outside of the United States because I do a daily show called Chef AJ Live on YouTube. And my guest today was from the Netherlands. And she was telling me about all the salt-free seasonings she can buy there. But in the United States, with the internet, it's very easy to have access to these, whether it's the Mrs. Dash from the regular grocery store, which be careful because some of them do have sugar, to all the wonderful spice stores that people have in various locations like Penzies or Savory Spice or Local Spicery or there's companies now like Dylan Holmes from Well Your World or Debbie Benson from Benson's Table Tasty. People are making lines of salt-free seasonings that are absolutely fantastic. So there is a way to do it. It's just at first it's difficult. One of the things I love to use is balsamic vinegars. They are like magic. The good quality ones like California balsamic that are reduced to 4% from 6%. They come in a variety of flavors. And I mean, there's tips and tricks, but the thing is it does take some time.
Yeah. And we do want to emphasize that, it's not like an all or nothing, when I counsel patients, it's really meeting them where they are. The most important thing is that for me is like, I find, if they're aware of it, they're aware of where their, health status is, they want to make change and they're open to it, but they want to make baby steps, and, I try to emphasize, we're going through a transition and I care more about progress over perfection. So eventually we'll get to where you need to be, but it's all about the baby steps. So it sounds like you're meeting clients where they are over time as you're either teaching a class or one-on-one. So
yeah, a lot of times, though, I always joke that I'm kind of the last stop on the train for most people. Most people that are like 20 with 5 extra pounds don't find me. It's usually people that have suffered a long time, and so they often need to take bigger steps to get the results because it's been so long in the pleasure trap.
That actually reminds me of my own mother. She's a Chinese medical doctor. I think I shared with you off camera before, and she's the last resort. A lot of her patients have gone to so many different doctors' doorsteps before ultimately reaching her. So yeah, I understand that notion, and it's their pain points of not having a solution. And so like what you're offering them is like, hey, this is what I've gone through. This is what I've studied and learned. And this can help you as well. So, but at the same time, as long as they could put in the work and to, get to where they need to be. So my next question is that, more in our current context, bringing it to the beginning of the pandemic, have you learned anything in terms of how you've became more resilient? Because I think I've been, talking about this a lot, how, it's unfortunate how a virus can unite humanity, right? But it also teaches us learning how to pivot or learning how to be more resilient. So since the pandemic, have you, learned anything about how to increase one's, resilience within yourself?
Yeah, well, I know how to do it within myself. I don't know if I can help others do it other than to, say, a saying my mom always said, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And the minute the pandemic started, I looked for what I could do, what good I could find. I remember I'm one of those eternal optimists. I remember I was 4 years old and my bubby, my great grandmother who had diabetes, had her legs amputated. I remember being with her in the nursing home, and it was, kind of shocking. And I wasn't trying to be facetious or funny at the age of 4, but I remember saying, well, don't have to shave your legs now. I always try to look for like, what's good about this. And since, remember when the pandemic started, or at least the day that our governor said we had to shelter in place, I believe it was March 19th, 2020. I mean, I'm not going to change policy like, but if I can, that quickly. So I just accepted what is. And I'm like, well, what can I do? My job was basically speaking at conferences. That's how I made my living. I would travel almost every week to a different spa or resort or a cruise or a medical conference, and that was my job. Well, I knew that wasn't going to be happening because everything got canceled. So we moved our business online, and we found it was not only like more enjoyable for me not having to get on a plane every week, but that I was able to reach many more people because, there are people all over the world that can work with me virtually that really probably aren't going to come to a conference. And as wonderful as those conferences are, meeting 200 to maybe 500 people, I can meet thousands of people in the way that I'm doing business now. Yeah. And the other thing I did, and I was really not even like, when I say this, I'm on YouTube, but I don't consider myself a YouTuber. Like that's not what I write on my income taxes. My job is influencer. But I always had a YouTube, not always, but for the last 10 years, I had a YouTube channel, mostly putting up a recipe a week. And when the pandemic started, I started going live, not realizing I was going live on YouTube and Facebook. I thought I was going live to just a private group, and then people were watching, and so more and more people were watching, and it turned into really the joy of my life, doing a daily show where now, again, I'm meeting people that I would never meet because they're contacting me from countries that I realistically didn't think I probably ever going to get to. And now I can have them on my show, and then they can influence more people because who knows, like today was Netherlands, yesterday was Belgium. Who knows where these plant eaters are that are looking for somebody in their country or their community. So right. It's been wonderful. So, and also the thing about the pandemic that's been kind of cool is it just reinforced something that I really always teach, which is preparedness. And I don't mean necessarily preparedness for an earthquake, which, by the way, I think is important. Mm-hmm. Really funny because I love learning. A couple of weeks before the pandemic, I took a certification class, like an emergency class, like in my community. Just, like they taught us basic first aid and how to, just. Gotcha. I just wanted to be part of my community, and it was like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday class. So I had learned a lot. And so when the pandemic came, it was like, I didn't have a lot to do. I was kind of prepared. I had my rice, I had my beans, I had my flash. I mean, I had all the water because I was basically doing what I learned in the class. And the only thing I think additional we did out of that initial fear is we went to Costco and got, one of, those 50-pound bags of rice, which we still have, by the way.
Oh, I thought you were going to say toilet paper. So.
That was sold out at the beginning. We were able to get the rice. And I always say, and I'm looking at a sign right here of a batch cooking class, success class I teach, being prepared is just, preparation trumps motivation all the time. And so I've always been a big believer in batch cooking, even if somebody really is on a healthy diet. Like it's just so much easier to have things ready. It makes life a lot easier. And so the pandemic just kind of shined a light on things I already knew that, and also what's important because, like, you realize what you can live without and what you can't. And not that friends aren't important, but like, I understand like there are probably people that were sequestered, like living all alone. And I feel for them. That's one of the reasons I did the show. But, with my little dog and my husband, I mean, we're introverts. We were fine. And the thing is you will be fine and things will open up again. And so I think so many people just freaked out, which I understand on one level, but so many other people just rose to the occasion and used that time that instead of like being upset and eating and gaining weight, they use that time like, wow, I don't have this 2-hour commute anymore. Yes. I can actually exercise. I can actually batch cook. I actually can get to bed on time. So some people really looked for the gift in it. And that's kind of how, it's an old story. It was this little boy, and I don't want to, I'm going to tell it wrong, but there was this there's all this horse poop around. And he's like, well,
Right.
with all this poop in here, there must be a pony somewhere. And that's kind of how with the pandemic, look for the gift, because that's how I looked at it. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, if I'm more of a silver linings, type of person, and I think it presents an opportunity to go deeper within yourself, self-reflect. And, if you were sequestered with, a significant other or family, it teaches you to, even learn different communication styles and learning how to reinforce those relationships. Because at the end of the day, there was a Harvard researchers, over a 75, 80-year-old study that said the main keys to happiness was your relationship. And that applies to every relationship, so I think it was a great thing. Thank you so much for sharing that inspirational note. So I would love to close out. This is called Thrive Bites for a reason. And I love asking my guests, how do they personally thrive? And so, we've gotten, little nuggets, throughout the session. Any other ways that Chef AJ personally thrives herself, or, any things that we may not have known about that she adds to her repertoire of, getting her to a certain state of thriving?
Yeah, I think self-care, and people a lot of times think self-care is selfish, but I think of self-care as healthcare. And for years, I put everyone first. And the problem with putting yourself last is you can't really give from an empty cup. And I'm a big fan of volunteer work. Up until the pandemic, I was volunteering 3 days a week, one day at a hospital, one day to school, and one day at a library. And, and I was burning the candle at both ends. And not to say I'm not going to volunteer again, but I think you have to take care of your own needs first. It's sort of like when the flight attendant tells you that if there's a drop in cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will drop, put it on your nose and mouth before your kid.
Yep.
It's sort of like that. And I realized that without self-care, I'm not good to anybody. That's why if I don't get my minimum daily requirement of self-care, if you will, which is adequate sleep. You can't go on a sleep debt for very long. I mean, I guess you can do it occasionally if you have a trip or a test to study for, but I never realized until I got older how important sleep was, and especially for a person that's caffeine free, that can't use the caffeine to artificially wake myself up. You've got to get adequate sleep in life. And so going to bed on time, it's a non-negotiable now. Like people say, well, can't you, talk or come? No, sleep is medicine. It really is. And so things like that, like making certain things non-negotiable. Exercise has to be non-negotiable. I wish there was a way to not exercise. I really would. If I could have like a superpower, I'd pay somebody to pee for me and to exercise for me. Both of these are just annoyances that take up too much time in my day. But I understand that it's not possible. And I didn't exercise till I was in my 50s. And I didn't exercise to lose weight, by the way. I didn't start exercising till I was already slender. But for mental health, especially in this day and age, for better sleep. But, everything I'm learning from the Shirzais, the neurologist, about preventing Alzheimer's and those long muscles in the leg, it has to be non-negotiable. I could probably count on one hand the times in a year that I didn't exercise. It was probably because I had an early morning something, or didn't exercise first thing in the morning. But you've got to do these things first. You can't just the more you put things off, the more you're likely not to do them. So diet, sleep, and exercise, and of course stress management. But see, when you eat a health promoting diet without processed food and alcohol and coffee and stimulants, and when you exercise, you just sleep better. And so if they're all, people tend to do one thing. Like you got these people that are really, really fit. They don't think much about what they're putting in their body. And then you got these people that eat perfectly and then they don't exercise, or, they might have like one leg of the stool. A stool has 4 legs. Diet, sleep, exercise, stress management. Or, you can have a fifth leg, the human connectivity. It's the pillars of lifestyle medicine. But if you take one leg off a stool, the stool falls down. So it doesn't matter how strong the other 3 legs are. And so people need to learn that it's not selfish to put yourself first in a self-care manner where, and then things, when you do that, you model it for your friends and family. And I think it's especially important to model if you have children. But I would say what you eat matters. Just like what you eat matters, whether or not you sleep matters. And it's just lifestyle medicine at its core.
It really is. It really is. And, I totally agree with you. It can be seen as selfish. And, it is one of my favorite analogies, like for that oxygen mask to come down. And it just teaches us that, at the end of the day, as much as we want to give and overgive and, be there for every single body, it really needs to come from you. And by coming from you, it is leading by example. You're showing up for people, you're role modeling that, I do value myself first. I'm saying, whether it's the quality of food that you put in your mouth, whether how well we move, whether it's, maintaining those set of, self-limiting beliefs or positive thinking, what I'm saying? So my last question to you is that, can you give us 3 quick tips? You really harp on, preparedness. So in terms of culinary preparedness, can you offer any audience like 3 quick tips that they could start getting implemented today?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was an Instant Pot, because most people say they can't eat healthy because they don't have enough money or enough time. If you have an Instant Pot, you will have plenty of time, because things that would take you really long to do conventionally will take minutes. For example, steel cut oats, an hour on the stove, 5 minutes in the Instant Pot. Corn on the cob, 0 minutes in the Instant Pot. Soups, stews, chilies, things like that. So getting a tool like an Instant Pot, which I've seen as low as $39, you don't have to get like the 20 quart. That can really help you get healthy meals on the table quickly. And with the time you save, because you don't have to babysit it like you do a stove, you could be doing your exercise, or
there you go,
your dog, or just snuggling your puppy, or things like that. So I think that's really, really helpful. And to batch cook. It doesn't make sense if you're going to have a baked potato to cook one. It makes no sense. Even if you're a single person, batch cook. It takes the same amount of energy. It's not any more difficult. And most things can be frozen, by the way. And it's just, when you have healthy food ready and that's all you have, guess what? You're going to eat it. And I would say, having a clean environment, and that not just the mental environment, and not being in, I should talk now. My room's probably messy. So
we don't see it. It's okay.
Thank goodness. But if you're trying to get healthy, and especially if you're trying to lose weight, don't have the kind of foods in your environment that are going to make it so hard for you to stay on plan, because like we said earlier in this conversation, you're genetically hardwired to prefer sugar, fat, and salt, high calorie foods for survival. If they're in your house, you're going to eat them. And I always say, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. So having a clean environment, this one and the one that you live in, it's really important, I think, and critical to your success.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. For those of us that want to learn more about you, what are the best ways to learn more about you or to reach out to you?
You can find me, unless something changes, every single day at 11 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, where I broadcast a live show called Chef AJ Live. And my website is my name, chefaj.com. So I have books and classes and things like that. But if you just want to talk to me, come watch the live show, because we have a little chat box going on. So even though the guest is cooking over there, I'm typing like, hey, how you doing? You had any fun? Kind of fun. It's like 2 shows at once.
Yeah. No, that's good, because like you said, we had to pivot and, reposition ourselves to stay in contact with people. And at the end of the day, it's about connection, right? Connection with our food, but also connection with each other. So, Chef AJ, thank you so much for being here with us on the Thrive Bites podcast. And, I really greatly value, the person you are, the journey you've traversed, and, everything that you continue to teach and inspire others with. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching to another episode of Thrive Bites, and we will see you on the next one. Please say goodbye to Chef AJ.